Outside the Grand Aurora Hotel, where Christmas lights blazed against the winter sky and red carpets stretched toward gleaming doors, hundreds of cameras aimed at the entrance. That was when Vivian Hartman froze. A sharp ripping sound cut through the cold air. Her fitted evening gown had torn open at the waist, exposed under crystal chandeliers. Vivienne stood paralyzed, tears streaming down her face as the crowd murmured and pointed. Then a stranger stepped forward. A single father no one knew, holding a pair of old scissors. New York, in the week before Christmas, wore its finest costume. Snowflakes drifted through streetlights like ash from a gentler fire. Yellow bulbs hung from every storefront. Carol music floated from speakers outside the hotel lobby, competing with traffic and laughter. The scent of pine and cinnamon rode the freezing wind. The Grand Aurora Hotel rose like a palace from another century, all white marble and brass fixtures polished to a golden glow. Inside, the ceilings soared high enough to swallow sound. Crystal chandeliers hung like frozen fireworks, catching and multiplying every beam of light. Red carpet rolled from the stone steps through the revolving doors. 2 rows of Christmas trees flanked the path, decorated with red glass ornaments and gold ribbons that swayed in the breeze. Tonight was the Hartman Christmas Gala, the biggest fundraising event of the year for the Children's Heart Christmas Fund, which paid for heart surgeries and scholarships for kids whose families had nothing else. Everyone who mattered had come. Fashion journalists, political donors, celebrities who smiled for cameras and wrote checks to soothe their consciences. The whole evening balanced on a knife edge of reputation and money. In the world of the very rich, one small mistake could become a scandal. One stumble could be photographed, twisted, and shared until it destroyed everything. The unwritten law was brutal and simple: be perfect or be erased. Vivian Hartman was 34 years old and chief executive officer of Hartman Luxe, a fashion and luxury retail empire that stretched across 3 continents. Her public image had been carved from ice and polished to a mirror shine. Cold, precise, sharp, untouchable. She always appeared like a statue made of glass. Her hair was always perfect. Her smile was measured. Her clothes cost more than most people earned in a month. Everything had to be flawless, because anything less was ammunition for her enemies. The pressure tonight felt like a hand squeezing her throat. The board of directors had been circling her like sharks ever since last quarter's profits dipped. A partnership deal with a European fashion house was supposed to be announced on stage tonight. If it fell through, if she showed weakness, the board would push her aside. The media waited like vultures for one moment of weakness, one crack they could turn into a headline. Deep inside, beneath the tailored gowns and controlled smiles, Vivian carried a fear she never spoke aloud. She hated feeling powerless, especially in front of a crowd. Her childhood had taught her that love came only when you succeeded. Failure meant being alone. Somewhere in the back corridors of the Grand Aurora, away from the lights and champagne, Ethan Walker checked a string of bulbs on one of the Christmas trees near a service entrance. He was 36 years old, lean and solid, with calm eyes that carried a shadow of old sadness. His clothes were simple, the kind men wore when they worked with their hands in cold weather: thermal layer under a worn canvas jacket, work boots with new laces on old leather. Ethan worked several part-time jobs during the holiday season because no single job paid enough. Maintenance work for events like this, helping stage crews, sometimes fixing costumes if the wardrobe team needed skilled hands. Tonight he carried a small toolkit in his jacket pocket. Inside was a pair of old scissors, worn but carefully maintained. They had belonged to someone he loved. He carried them everywhere, a habit that had become a kind of prayer. He had taken this shift tonight because he desperately needed the money. Christmas gifts for his daughter, school fees that were 2 weeks overdue. The neighbor who usually watched Lily had canceled at the last minute. Ethan had to beg another neighbor to cover an extra 2 hours. That meant he had to work fast, finish everything, and stay out of trouble. No complications. Just finish the job and get home before Lily started to worry. What no one at the gala knew, what Ethan kept buried like a scar, was that he had once been talented. He had once understood fabric and seams the way musicians understand notes. He could look at a piece of cloth and hear what it needed. But that life had ended years ago, folded away like old blueprints in a drawer. Back at a small apartment across the city, Lily Walker sat at the kitchen table with crayons and paper. She was 7 years old, smart and sensitive, with a habit of drawing dresses and collecting scraps of Christmas ribbon. Tonight, a neighbor watched her while she waited for her father to come home. Lily had been excited all day. They were going to hang the star on top of their little Christmas tree together, the way they did every year. It was the one tradition her father never broke. Inside the hotel ballroom, other people moved through the evening with their own agendas. Serena Caldwell, the head of public relations for Hartman Luxe, calculated every angle of every photograph. Her job was to protect the brand, and she would erase anything or anyone who threatened that image. Malcolm Grayson, chairman of the board, stood near the bar with a glass of whiskey and a cold smile. He had power, and he was always looking for a way to use it. Vivian was in his way. He had been waiting for an opportunity to remove her. Jasper Knox, the star designer invited as a guest of honor, moved through the crowd like a shark through shallow water. Arrogant. Jealous. He wanted the spotlight, and he wanted creative control of the Hartman brand. Tonight was supposed to be his stage. Bianca Hale, lead stylist for the event, hovered near the dressing rooms, checking her phone every 30 seconds. She was good at her job, but easily rattled. If something went wrong, she knew she would be the first person they blamed. Marcus Reed, head of security, stood near the main entrance with an earpiece and a stiff posture. He followed orders from PR and the board. Sometimes he followed them too well. Outside, a black car pulled up to the curb. Vivian sat in the back seat, staring at her reflection in the tinted window. She could hear the MC's voice echoing from the speakers near the entrance, announcing guests as they arrived. Her name would be called in less than 2 minutes. This was the moment that would define everything. She took one breath, then opened the door. The cold hit her like a slap. She stepped out of the car, one hand gathering the train of her gown. The cameras turned toward her all at once, a wall of flashing light. The MC's voice rose, calling her name like the opening note of a symphony. That was when it happened. A sharp, tearing sound. Not loud, but unmistakable. The kind that made everyone nearby stop and turn. Vivian felt the fabric give way at her waist, right along the seam where the gown hugged her hips. The tear opened like a wound, exposed under the glare of 100 camera flashes. She froze on the bottom step. One hand reached instinctively to cover the rip, but it was already too late. Everyone had seen. The photographers moved in like wolves. Camera shutters roared. Microphones appeared, thrust toward her face by reporters who smelled blood. Whispers rippled through the crowd, spreading faster than fire. Serena Caldwell turned pale. She leaned toward Marcus Reed and hissed into his ear. "Get her inside. Now. Block the cameras." But security hesitated. If they grabbed Vivian and dragged her away, it would look brutal. The video would go viral in minutes. But if they left her standing there, the torn dress would be photographed from every angle, and the scandal would explode. Vivian tried to smile. The smile cracked. For a few seconds, she felt stripped bare in front of the world. All the power she had built, all the control she had fought for, torn apart by a single broken seam. Tears welled in her eyes. She hated herself for it. Everyone would say she was weak. The shareholders would say she did not have the strength to lead. Behind her, chaos spilled out from the service corridors. Bianca ran forward with safety pins and a wrap, But there was no time to take Vivienne back to a dressing room. The gown was fitted too tightly to fix with pins. One wrong move, and the fabric would tear even more. Jasper Knox stood a few feet away, watching. A flicker of satisfaction crossed his face. Malcolm Grayson stepped out of the main entrance, his eyes cold and calculating. He looked at the torn gown the way a hunter looks at a wounded animal. "Do not let tonight become a joke," he said quietly. That was when Ethan appeared. He had been near the side entrance, checking the wiring on a string of Christmas lights, when he heard the commotion. He glanced over and saw the torn fabric, the cameras, the woman frozen at the center of it all. Something in him recognized the shape of the problem, the angle of the rip, the way the material had split along the grain. It was the kind of thing he used to fix without thinking. He walked forward, calm and steady, his hand already reaching into his jacket pocket. "Give me 2 minutes," he said. His voice was quiet but certain, and a little space. Everyone stopped. Security guards, stylists, photographers. They all turned to stare at this man in simple work clothes, holding a pair of old scissors. "Who are you?" someone demanded. "Why do you have scissors?" another voice asked. Ethan did not argue. He did not explain. He just looked at Vivienne. His gaze was steady, not afraid, not flattering. Just a look that said, "I can fix this." Vivienne stood at the edge of a cliff. Trust a stranger, or let herself be torn apart in front of the world. She swallowed her tears. She nodded, barely moving her head. Serena tried to step between them. No. He could make it worse. Vivienne turned and looked at her PR director with something harder than anger. "Worse than standing here?" she said. Her voice was soft, but it cut. Ethan spoke to Marcus Reed without raising his voice. "Put people around us. Block the cameras for 30 seconds. Do not pull her away. Just make a wall." Security hesitated, then moved. They positioned themselves around Vivienne, using coats and bodies to create a temporary barrier. It was not perfect, but it was something. Ethan knelt beside the torn gown and studied it like a surgeon studies a wound. He did not try to hide the rip or patch it clumsily. He looked at the direction of the tear, the tension in the fabric, how the seam had failed. The material was silk with a satin weave and a little stretch. If he tried to pull it back together, it would only tear more. He made a decision that seemed insane to everyone watching. "I am not going to patch it," he said quietly. "I am going to turn it into a design." Bianca stared at him. "You are cutting more?" "I am controlling it," Ethan said. He opened his toolkit. The scissors were small and old, the blades slightly worn but sharp. He also had black thread, a needle, fashion tape, and metal clips. He worked quickly but never rushed. He trimmed the torn edge into a clean line, then cut an asymmetrical slit that angled across the hip, making it look intentional, like something that belonged on a runway in Paris. Bianca watched in shock. "You are making it worse." "I am making it mine," Ethan said softly. Vivienne felt her panic shift into something else. This stranger was giving her instructions. "Look straight ahead," he said. "Drop your shoulders. Do not look down." She obeyed. For the first time in her life, someone was telling her what to do, and she felt safe. She looked at his hands. They were rough, marked with old scars and calluses, the hands of someone who had worked hard for a long time. These were not the hands of an amateur. Her tears were still there, but they did not fall. Ethan finished the last stitch and stepped back. He used a strip of fashion tape to secure the inner layer of fabric. The torn gown had become something else. A cutout at the waist, edged with a sharp, asymmetrical line. It looked bold, expensive, intentional. He gave Vivienne one more piece of advice. "When you walk, go half a beat slower. Let the fabric fall the way it wants to." Serena saw what had happened and immediately changed tactics. She could not hide this. She had to spin it. She whispered urgently to the MC, "Call it a surprise design moment for Christmas." The doors opened. The lights hit Vivienne like a wave. The cameras exploded with flashes. But instead of laughter, there was stunned silence. The gown looked striking, daring, powerful. Vivienne found the queen inside herself again. She lifted her chin. Her eyes were sharp. But deep down, she knew the truth. Without that man, she would have collapsed. Near the side entrance, Jasper Knox watched with narrowed eyes. He knew fabric. He knew structure. This was not an accident. This was the work of someone who understood garments at a level most designers never reached. Jealousy flared in his chest. Tonight was supposed to belong to him. Ethan did not wait for thanks. He glanced at his watch. He had to get home to Lily. He turned toward the service exit, but before he could leave, a staff member rushed over. "Mr. Walker, the backup generator near the stage is making a strange noise." Ethan hesitated. He wanted to leave. He needed to leave. But responsibility pulled him back. He nodded and followed the staff member toward the technical area. That decision to turn back would pull him into a storm far bigger than a torn gown. Inside the ballroom, Vivienne stood on stage under a towering Christmas tree that nearly touched the ceiling. A children's choir sang carols in the background. She spoke about hope, second chances, how even a broken thing could let light through. The words sounded like PR, but for her, they were real. She had just lived them. Ethan reached the generator room and knelt beside the machine. He heard a faint scraping sound, like metal dragging across fabric. It made something in his gut tighten. He moved a trash bin aside and found a small canvas bag hidden behind equipment crates. Inside were a thin razor blade with fabric fibers caught on the edge, and a scrap of material that matched Vivienne's gown exactly. His blood went cold. The tear had not been an accident. This was sabotage, timed for maximum damage when the cameras were watching. He moved quietly through the back hallways, his mind working fast. Who had access? Who would benefit from Vivienne failing tonight? Who had been standing close enough to plant the blade? He moved quietly through the back hallways, listening. Near a storage room, he heard voices. One was deep and decisive. Malcolm Grayson. The other was younger, smoother, someone from Jasper's team. Ethan caught fragments of their conversation. As long as she lost her composure on the red carpet. After tonight, the vote to remove the CEO will go smoothly. An image stumble is all we need. Ethan's hand closed around the scissors in his pocket. This was not about a dress. This was about destroying someone's dignity. Back in the ballroom, Vivienne smiled and shook hands with donors and politicians. But her mind kept circling back to the man with the scissors. That man who helped me. "Where is he?" Bianca stammered. "Just a backstage worker. I do not know his name." Vivienne felt a strange pull. Someone like that could not have been random. She tried to look toward the service hallways, but Serena pulled her back to greet another VIP. For a moment, Vivienne glanced at the children's choir singing near the Christmas tree. She remembered her own childhood, eating Christmas dinner alone with a nanny, no one to hang a star with. She felt a sudden, desperate wish. Tonight could not just be about polishing her image. She wanted to feel human again. Ethan stood in the dim hallway, holding the evidence in his hand. He was just a nobody in a world full of wolves. But he knew something they did not. Vivienne slipped away from the VIP tables and made her way through the staff corridors. She found Ethan near a panel of electrical switches, his hands steady as he worked. She cleared her throat softly. Ethan looked up. "I just did my job." Vivienne's eyes drifted to the scissors tucked into his toolkit. The blades were worn but carefully sharpened. The handle was scratched like something carried for years. "Those scissors," she said. "They are not new." Ethan paused. "They belong to my wife, Emily Walker. She used to sew Christmas clothes for kids in our neighborhood." He told the story in short, quiet sentences. Emily had gotten sick. He had quit everything to take care of her. After she died, he worked whatever jobs he could find to support their daughter. The scissors were the one thing he kept. Vivienne felt something crack inside her chest. Ethan's phone buzzed. The neighbor's voice came through, worried. "Lily keeps asking when you will be home to hang the star." Ethan looked at his watch. His hand trembled slightly. He was terrified of breaking promises to his daughter. She was all he had left. Vivienne heard the word star and felt her throat tighten. She had never hung a star with anyone. "Did you study design?" Vivienne asked. Ethan avoided her eyes. "I studied a little." No one cuts like that with just a little study. Ethan finally admitted it. He had gone to art school once. He had won a scholarship. He had dreamed of launching a Christmas collection. Then he stopped, as if swallowing something painful. "Dreams do not feed a kid," he said. From across the hall, Serena saw Vivienne talking to the maintenance worker. She moved quickly. "This does not look good for your image." Malcolm Grayson watched from a distance. His eyes were cold and calculating. "That man knows too much," he thought. Vivienne had started to choose the human over the mask, and Ethan had become a target. Serena pulled Vivienne aside and spoke in a low, urgent voice. "We will say the dress was a surprise design by Jasper Knox." "Why?" Vivienne asked. "To avoid the story of a CEO being saved by a poor worker. To avoid memes. To keep control." Vivienne's jaw tightened. "I do not steal credit from people." Jasper Knox found Ethan in a back hallway. He smiled, but the smile was sharp. He held out an envelope. "I will pay you to forget everything." Ethan did not take it. "I do not sell the truth." Jasper's voice dropped. "You are just hired help. One call to the police and you lose custody of your kid." Malcolm Grayson made a call to Marcus Reed. "Detain that man. Check his employee credentials. If there is any violation, remove him from the property." Malcolm's plan was simple. If Ethan talked about the razor blade and the conspiracy, the gala would become a scandal that damaged the entire company. Malcolm wanted control. Either make Ethan the scapegoat or silence him completely. Ethan tried to send the evidence to Vivienne through Bianca. "I have something the CEO needs to see." Bianca was terrified. She was afraid of losing her job, afraid of being punished by PR. She did not respond. Ethan decided to find Vivienne himself, but security blocked his path. Then his phone rang again. The neighbor's voice was strained. "I have an emergency. Can I bring Lily to the hotel?" Ethan's heart dropped. He did not want his daughter anywhere near the media circus, but he had no choice. And that gave Malcolm and Jasper exactly the leverage they needed. The neighbor brought Lily through a side entrance, but the hallways were packed with guests. For a few seconds, that felt much longer, Lily stood alone under bright lights and loud voices, clutching a small wrapped box. She was looking for her father, turning her head left and right, eyes wide and frightened. 7 years old and lost. Vivienne saw her by accident. She had been pulled into another conversation with a donor, nodding on autopilot. Then she glanced toward the hallway and saw a little girl standing there, holding a gift, shivering in a thin coat, eyes searching desperately. The image hit Vivienne like a punch. Too real, too far from the artificial world she had built. Malcolm saw his chance. He made a subtle gesture to Marcus Reed. "Arrest that man." He brought scissors into a formal event. That is enough evidence of intent. Marcus moved toward Ethan with 2 other officers. Cameras started recording. Guests pulled out their phones. Serena panicked. "Do not make a scene in the ballroom." Malcolm's voice was ice. "Exactly. We need a clean scapegoat." Ethan stayed calm, but his voice shook. "Do not scare my daughter. Please. Whatever you think I did, do not do this in front of her." Lily started crying. Quiet, heartbroken crying. "Daddy, let us go home and hang the star." "You promised." Cameras turned. The narrative was already forming. Man with scissors detained at CEO's gala. Vivienne overheard fragments. Razor blade. Vote to remove the CEO. She looked at Ethan. He did not look like a saboteur. He looked like a father willing to take a beating to protect his child. She made the biggest choice of her life. She walked down from the stage, her heels loud against the marble floor. She raised her hand. "Let him go," she said. Her voice carried across the room. She turned to Ethan in front of everyone. "What did you see? What do you know?" Ethan pulled out the razor blade and the fabric scrap. He pointed to where the blade could have been hidden in a wardrobe assistant's coat pocket. He asked them to check the security footage from the technical hallway. Jasper's face went white. Malcolm tried to cut in. "Enough. Take the CEO inside." But the crowd had become a courtroom. The cameras were judges. Vivienne had chosen truth over reputation, and now everyone was watching. Vivienne ordered the security office opened immediately. The hotel was a partner of Hartman Lux, which gave her access. Bianca and the tech team pulled up footage on multiple screens. What they found was damning. Footage of a young assistant from Jasper's crew slipping into the wardrobe area 40 minutes before the gala. He moved quickly, glancing over his shoulder twice, spent less than 2 minutes inside, then left with hands in pockets. Footage of Malcolm and Jasper speaking in a closed hallway, their body language tense and conspiratorial. Malcolm leaning in close. Jasper nodding. Footage from earlier in the week showing the same assistant making multiple trips to wardrobe storage, each time carrying a small bag that security never checked. Serena had no choice. If public relations tried to cover this up now, they would all burn. She stepped to Vivienne's side. Malcolm's mask cracked slowly. He had not just wanted Vivienne embarrassed. He needed her disgraced before shareholders so he could replace her with someone who would not ask questions about financial statements that did not add up. He was hiding violations serious enough for prison. He wanted to bury them under an image scandal. Vivienne understood. The Christmas gala for children had been used as a weapon. Jasper tried to spin the story. This is a misunderstanding, but the evidence was clear. The razor. The video. The testimony of wardrobe staff. Security escorted Jasper out of the hotel. His reputation collapsed in a single night. Vivienne stood before the full crowd of donors and media. She spoke clearly. Ethan was the one who saved the gown and saved the gala. She did not frame it as charity. She framed it as acknowledgement. Without him, tonight would have been nothing but selfish disaster. Ethan only asked for one thing. "I need to take my daughter home. She is scared." Vivienne knelt in front of Lily. "What is your name?" Lily held out a small box. "Daddy worked to buy this. I want him to come home and hang the star." Vivienne felt her throat close. For the first time, she understood. Christmas was not a stage. It was a small apartment where people needed each other. She made an offer, not as a boss hiring labor. As a partner, you could redesign the Christmas line for the foundation. Ethan hesitated. He was afraid that stepping into that world would hurt Lily. Vivienne said the words that changed everything. "I do not need you to sacrifice your daughter. I need you to keep that heart exactly the way it is." Weeks passed. Malcolm was placed under investigation for financial fraud. The board restructured after 3 members resigned. Vivienne faced brutal media pressure in different ways. Some praised her courage. Others questioned why she had not noticed the corruption sooner. She faced difficult questions in depositions and board meetings. But this time, she did not hide. She answered honestly. She admitted what she had not known. She took responsibility. Slowly, she learned that being human was not the same as being weak. Serena changed too. She learned to tell stories with truth instead of manipulation. She discovered that authenticity resonated more powerfully than any crafted narrative. She started working on campaigns that featured real families, real struggles, real hope. On Christmas Eve, Ethan returned to his small apartment. The heat worked, which was more than some people had. The windows were drafty but covered with curtains Lily had helped him choose. There was a tiny Christmas tree in the corner. He hung the star on top, carefully climbing on a chair, just like he had promised. The star was old, bought when Emily was still alive, but it still glowed. Lily had fallen asleep on the couch hours earlier, curled under a blanket, holding her box of crayons. Ethan covered her with a second blanket and kissed her forehead gently. He looked at the old scissors on the kitchen table. They were not just tools anymore. They were proof that second chances existed, that broken things could be made beautiful again. Someone knocked softly. 3 quiet taps. Ethan opened the door and found Vivian standing in the hallway. No security, no cameras, no armor, just a thick winter coat, a wool scarf, and a cardboard box in her arms. She looked younger somehow, more real. "Can I come in?" she asked quietly. "I do not want to be alone tonight. I brought decorations, just some things I thought might be nice." Inside the box were simple ornaments. Wooden snowflakes, strings of popcorn, construction paper cutouts, also an invitation for Lily, written in careful handwriting, to visit the Children's Foundation. Ethan stepped aside. Lily stirred but did not wake. Vivienne looked around the small apartment, taking in the mismatched furniture and crayon drawings taped to the refrigerator. It was not big, but it was filled with love in a way her penthouse had never been. The dress was displayed at the next foundation fundraiser. She called it Second Stitch and told the full story. The auction brought in enough money to fund heart surgeries for 12 children. Ethan designed a collection of accessories for Christmas: ribbons, scarves, evening wraps. Each piece came with a card, from broken to light, from failure to hope, from despair to beauty. The ending was not a fairy tale. No wedding, no grand gesture. But there was something quieter and more real. A promise that unfolded slowly. Vivienne learned to soften the edges she had sharpened for so many years. She learned to ask for help. She learned that crying did not make her weak. Ethan learned to open his heart without fear of losing Lily or betraying Emily's memory. He learned that love was not finite. He learned that letting someone in did not mean pushing someone else out. On Christmas morning, when the sun was just starting to turn the sky from black to gray to pale gold, Vivienne, Ethan, and Lily went to the children's hospital together to deliver gifts. Simple things. Books, toys, art supplies. Things that mattered more than their cost. Lily tied a red ribbon around Vivienne's wrist and smiled with unself-conscious joy. Vivienne looked at Ethan across a hospital room where a little boy was opening a box of building blocks. Her eyes were wet, but she was not ashamed. "Thank you," she whispered, "for not letting me break on those steps." Ethan shook his head slowly. He reached out and straightened the ribbon on her wrist. "It was not me. It was Christmas. Just reminding you that you are still human. That being human is enough." The snow fell softly outside the hospital windows, covering the city in quiet white. Inside, 3 people who had been alone, who had been broken in different ways, found something they had been missing. Not perfection, not power. Just the simple, profound warmth of being seen and loved and accepted exactly as they were.